The 12th of February, 1993, began as an ordinary day at the Strand Shopping Centre in Bootle, Liverpool. Denise Bulger, mother of little James, just 2 years old, decided to do some shopping with a friend. In a moment of distraction, while paying for her purchases at the butcher's, Denise let go of James' hand for less than a minute. When she looked down again, her son had disappeared. What no one could imagine was that this brief distraction would result in one of the most shocking crimes in the history of the United Kingdom. James Patrick Bulger, born on the 16th of March, 1990, a boy described as loving, social, and full of life, had been abducted by two boys who were just 10 years old, Robert Thompson and John Venables. The shopping center security cameras captured the moment when the two boys led James by the hand out of the shopping center. What followed in the next few hours was an act of incomprehensible cruelty that shocked not only Liverpool, but the entire world. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscription button now. Activate the bell to not miss any videos. As soon as Denise noticed James's disappearance, despair took over. She began searching frantically through the shopping center, while the mall's administration made an announcement requesting information about the boys' whereabouts. As no information emerged, the police were called. The security officer at the Strand Shopping Center immediately organized searches throughout the location. Denise described James as a little boy wearing a blue coat, gray pants, and a shirt. The police were called approximately 40 minutes after the disappearance, and at that moment, the protocol for missing children was activated. Initially, the main concern of investigators was the possibility that James had left the shopping center alone and might be near the canal in the vicinity, which would represent a real danger for such a small boy. The police began to search neighboring stores, waste areas, and nearby regions, hoping to find the boy safe. Denise was taken to the local police station, where she remained while the searches continued. During this period, police officers showed her shoes found in the vicinity, hoping they were James, but none belonged to the boy. The first real clue emerged when the shopping center's security team analyzed the CCTV camera recordings. The images showed James being led by the hand by two boys out of the shopping center. The quality of the images wasn't good, but it was sufficient for Denise to identify her son by the clothes he was wearing. Detective Albert Kirby, who led the investigation, initially estimated that the boys who appeared in the images were between 14 and 15 years old. The images showed James being led by the hand, leaving through the door of the shopping center at 15:42, just 2 minutes after disappearing from his mother's side. The discovery of these images completely transformed the nature of the investigation. It was no longer about a lost child, but a deliberate abduction. Despite the seriousness of the situation, there was some relief that James had been taken by young people and not by an adult, which suggested a greater possibility that he might be safe. The CCTV images were publicly released in the hope that someone would recognize the boys. Denise made an emotional appeal on television, pleading for the safe return of her son. She expressed her hope that the boys might simply be taking care of James, perhaps wishing to have a younger brother. As the hours passed, the search intensified. All of Liverpool's police were involved in the case, and authorities followed every possible lead. One of the first theories was that the boys might have taken James as a prank, without truly malicious intentions. The next day, searches continued without results. School absence lists for that day were checked in an attempt to identify young people who might fit the profile of the boys seen in the video. A critical point in the investigation was the discovery of additional recordings from an Amex company camera, which showed James with the two boys walking in a nearby area. This evidence provided investigators with a better idea of the route they had taken after leaving the shopping center. 2 days after the disappearance, the worst possible news arrived. James' body was found on Sunday afternoon, the 14th of February, by a group of children playing near the railway line in Walton, approximately 3 kilometers from the Strand Shopping Center. His body had been placed on the tracks and, subsequently hit by a train, but the autopsy revealed that he was already dead before this, victim of multiple blows to the head. When Denise was informed, she collapsed in tears. Police officer Mandy Waller, who was accompanying Denise at the time, described hearing a terrible scream, and then she simply broke within herself. For Denise, the world had collapsed. I simply felt alone. I was a mother without a child. The news shocked the entire Liverpool community. The idea that such a horrific crime could have been committed against such a small child was almost incomprehensible. The fact that the suspects were also children made everything even more disturbing. The investigation had now transformed into a hunt for the killers. The police began interrogating dozens of young people between 10 and 18 years old who had a history of violent behavior. More than 60 teenagers were questioned, but no concrete leads emerged. The turning point came when a woman contacted the Walton Lane police. She had seen the images on television and recognized one of the boys as John Venables, who lived near her. She mentioned that John had been absent from school on Friday and was with another boy from the same school, Robert Thompson. Notably, she observed that John had returned home that day with blue paint stains on his jacket, a relevant detail, as blue paint was found at the crime scene. Detective Phil Roberts was assigned to investigate Robert Thompson, while another team approached John Venables. What shocked the investigators most was discovering that the boys they were looking for were not teenagers, as initially thought, but children of just 10 years old. Thompson and Venables were arrested separately at their homes and taken to different police stations for interrogation. The officers described their shock upon realizing how young the suspects were. Detective Roberts reported that he never would have imagined that a 10-year-old boy could cause so much suffering, while the officer who interrogated Venables was struck by his little angelic face. The recordings of the interrogations reveal the disconcerting behavior of the two boys. During the first interviews, both denied any involvement. Thompson admitted being in the area but blamed Venables for all the actions, claiming he had asked his friend to return the baby. Venables, for his part, initially denied having even been in the shopping center that day. The decisive moment came when the police informed Venables that Thompson had admitted that both were with James. Venables began to cry, hugging his mother and the police officers, repeatedly shouting, "I never killed him." His vehement denial, however, began to crumble when confronted with physical evidence, including his fingerprints found in a store near the shopping center. Eventually, Venables made the first admissions, saying through tears, "I killed the baby. I'm very sorry. Can you tell his mother I'm sorry?" Thompson, however, continued to deny his direct involvement, trying to place all the blame on Venables. Through the interrogations and physical evidence, the investigators managed to reconstruct what happened on that fateful day. Thompson and Venables had skipped school and were in the Strand shopping center when they saw James. The abduction was not planned, it was an impulsive act. Later, it was discovered that they had attempted to abduct another child the day before, but were prevented by the mother. After taking James out of the shopping center, the boys led him on a walk of about 3 kilometers to the railway line in Walton. During this journey, they were seen by more than 30 people. Some went so far as to ask why the child was crying and bleeding, but the boys had a ready story. They said they had found James lost and were trying to take him to the nearest police station, or that he was the younger brother of one of them. The boys' initial plan, according to their later confessions, was to push James in front of a car to make it look like an accident. When that didn't work, they tried to drown him in a nearby canal, also without success. What followed in the final hours of James' life was an act of extreme cruelty. The two boys tortured little James in brutal ways. They beat him with bricks and an iron bar, threw paint in his eyes, and inflicted various other injuries. The official cause of death was determined to be cranial trauma resulting from multiple blows. After the murder, they placed the body on the railway tracks, hoping a train would pass and make it appear that the death had been accidental. Indeed, the body was subsequently hit by a train, being cut in half. To understand how two children, could commit such a brutal crime, it is important to analyze their family backgrounds, marked by neglect, abuse, and instability. Robert Thompson was the fifth of 7 children. His father abandoned the family when he was about 6 years old, leaving his mother Anne alone to raise all the children with extremely limited resources. After the father's departure, Anne became an alcoholic, and the children's emotional and physical needs were rarely adequately met. The dynamics in the Thompson house were chaotic and violent, with the older brothers often assaulting the younger ones. Just 7 weeks after the father left the family, their home was broken into, forcing them to spend 2 months in a hostel before being relocated to a small social housing unit, where the 8 family members lived, the mother and her 7 children. Anne's alcoholism reached an alarming level during this time. She came to keep a bottle under her bed to drink during the night and early in the morning. Social services regularly visited the family, but without substantial effects. Robert frequently missed classes in a single school term. He was absent for 49 out of 140 school days. When he wasn't in school, he wandered the streets or stole objects to help the family or to have his own toys, as the financial situation at home was extremely precarious. A particularly revealing incident occurred a few weeks before James's murder. Robert's younger brother was found alone, crying, in the same Strand shopping center. When questioned, he said that Robert and a friend, not Venables, but another boy, had taken him there and deliberately abandoned him. John Venables, on the other hand, came from an apparently more stable family, but with its own complications. He was the middle child of 3 siblings. Both his older brother and younger sister had learning difficulties, receiving special attention from parents and the school. Although John had no official diagnosis, he often imitated his siblings' behaviors, possibly to obtain the attention he saw being given to them. His parents, Neil and Susan, had an unstable relationship, with occasional separations. Neil believed in traditional family roles, where he should work while Susan took care of the children, an extremely difficult task, considering the special needs of 2 of the children. When John was just 1 year old, Susan's father died, leading to significant changes in the family dynamics. Susan moved with the children to her mother's house, while Neil established a separate residence, although the couple maintained their relationship. At school, John exhibited extremely disturbing behaviors. He would throw himself back and forth, bang his head against the table forcefully, tear objects off the walls, hide under tables, and self-mutilate with stones. Teachers reported that he cut holes in his own shoes and placed paper over his face. A particularly alarming episode occurred when he tried to strangle another student with a watering can, requiring 2 teachers to restrain him. Because of this behavior, John was suspended from school for 2 days, but his mother chose to keep him away for 10 entire weeks. When he finally returned to his studies, John had missed so much content that he was placed a year behind in the same class as Robert Thompson. The meeting between the 2 boys, both with problematic backgrounds and displaced from their original classes, created a toxic friendship that would culminate in the murder of James Bulger. Thompson and Venables were formally charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial began in November 1993 at the Preston Crown Court. Due to the enormous media coverage and the sensitivity of the case, the trial was transferred out of Liverpool. Being minors, the procedure was adapted to make it less intimidating. For example, the lawyers did not wear traditional wigs and gowns, and sessions were shorter than normal. However, the boys were still tried in an adult court, something that generated criticism from human rights organizations. In the British legal system of the time, it was assumed that children between 10 and 14 did not necessarily fully understand the difference between right and wrong, a concept known as doli incapax, incapacity to do evil. Thus, the prosecution needed to prove not only that they had killed James, but that they understood that kidnapping a child and beating him to death was fundamentally wrong. During the trial, disturbing evidence was presented, including the CCTV, recordings, testimonies from witnesses who had seen the boys with James, and details from the autopsy. Child psychiatry experts were called to assess whether the boys understood the gravity of their acts. After a 3-week trial, the jury unanimously found them guilty of both kidnapping and murder. The sentence, as was standard for minors convicted of murder, was detention during Her Majesty's pleasure, a form of imprisonment for an indefinite period, with periodic reviews. A controversial decision by the court was to allow the identification of the boys. Normally, underage defendants have their identities protected in the United Kingdom, but Judge Moreland determined that the public interest justified the disclosure of Thompson and Venables' names and school photographs. This decision had lasting implications for the two, making them instantly recognizable throughout the country. At the same time, the court ordered that no details about their future in custody could be revealed. In pronouncing the sentence, Judge Moreland declared, "The murder of James Bulger was an act of unthinkable evil and barbarity. The sentence I impose is detention for an indefinite period." He also noted that the boys would have to mature with the knowledge of what they did and why their lives were altered. The judge established a minimum period of 8 years before any release could be considered, a decision that would later be altered by other judicial authorities. Thompson and Venables were sent to separate secure units designed for young offenders. These facilities, administered by local authorities, are drastically different from conventional prisons. They resemble care homes more, with a focus on the well-being and rehabilitation of young people, including structured routines, regular education, and psychiatric therapy. The regime in these units included regular times for waking up, meals, and educational activities. The young people had access to recreational facilities such as game rooms, television, and sports activities. Each had their own private room, decorated according to their personal preferences. During the day, they attended normal classes, following the national school curriculum. In the evenings and on weekends, they participated in recreational activities and received visits from family members. A crucial aspect of their detention was regular sessions with psychiatrists and psychologists aimed at addressing the behavioral and emotional problems that had contributed to the crime. The cost of keeping young people in these units was high, approximately £3,000 per week for each, which generated criticism from part of the population who considered that Thompson and Venables were being rewarded, not punished. However, professionals who worked in these institutions argued that the real punishment was in the deprivation of liberty, not in the detention conditions. Leon McEwen, a former detainee who was in the same unit as Robert Thompson, later reported that, although everyone knew who Thompson was, the subject was rarely openly discussed among the inmates. With the passage of time, Thompson and Venables were gradually introduced to the mobility program, supervised outings from the unit for activities, such as shopping or sporting events. These activities, a standard part of the rehabilitation process, were always supervised by at least one staff member. When news about these outings reached the press, there was a strong public reaction. Reports claimed that Venables had been taken to watch Manchester United games at Old Trafford and that Thompson frequented shopping centers in Manchester. These revelations angered many, especially in Liverpool, where sentiment against the two remained intense. After 8 years of detention, Thompson and Venables, then 18 years old, became eligible for parole. In June 2001, the parole board determined that they no longer represented a danger to society and recommended their release. The Secretary of Justice, Lady Scotland, announced that both had made notable progress during their time in custody and would be released under strict parole conditions. To protect them from possible retaliation, there were numerous threats against their lives. They received new identities, legal documents, and fictional backgrounds. The release generated a strong public reaction, especially in Liverpool. Radio programs, like Pete Price's, were flooded with calls from outraged people, many arguing that the killers should remain in prison for the rest of their lives. The parole conditions included prohibition of contact between them, restrictions on approaching the Bulger family or Liverpool, and constant monitoring by probation officers. They were also prohibited from committing any new crime, under penalty. of immediate return to prison. The fate of the two after release followed different paths. Robert Thompson, from what is publicly known, adapted to life in freedom without major incidents. Information about his whereabouts and current life is scarce, protected by a permanent court order that prohibits the disclosure of any detail that could lead to his identification. John Venables, on the other hand, continued to have problems with the law. In March 2010, he was arrested again, this time for possession of child abuse images. He served 2 years in prison before being released in 2013 with a new identity. In November 2017, Venables returned to prison for similar charges, receiving a sentence of 3 years and 4 months. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Leave in the comments what you thought of this case or suggestions for upcoming videos. Your participation is very important to us. Until the next video!